The cold glass of a kitchen timer under your thumb can tell you something brutal. By the time most people are past 50, a major marker of aerobic and mitochondrial capacity has already been sliding for decades, often around 10% per decade after 30, and faster when the body stops being trained. You feel that drop in places no lab report ever announces out loud. In the burn on the stairs, in the way your chest stays busy after a short walk, in that strange dead zone in the afternoon when your whole system feels dim. Most people think that feeling is age, or stress, or just one of those things now. But your body keeps a quieter ledger. It tracks how well you handle a normal breath, how quickly you recover after effort, and how much reserve is left in the grid that powers every cell you own. That is your cellular energy age. And tonight, with nothing more than a chair, a stopwatch, and one honest exhale, you can get your first glimpse of it. Here is where the old world and the new one touch. Long before anyone used the phrase PGC1 alpha, people practiced breath restraint on purpose. They noticed something changed when you stopped gulping air and learned to meet that first wave of air hunger without panic. Modern physiology gives that old instinct a name. It is not a stunt, it is a signal. And signals are everything when the body decides whether to conserve, decline, or rebuild. So start simple. Sit upright. Let your shoulders drop. Breathe normally for a few breaths. Nothing dramatic, nothing theatrical. Then exhale as you usually would. Not a huge emptying, just a normal breath out. The moment the air leaves, start the timer. Hold only until the first definite urge to breathe. Not until your face tightens. Not until your throat jerks. Just the first clear signal from the body that says enough. That number is called the Body Oxygen Level Test, or BOLT, and it marks breathing tolerance more than bravery. That little count matters because it is one of the cleanest home clues to how your system handles carbon dioxide, stress, and energy demand. A restless, over-breathing body usually shows itself fast. A steadier one buys time. The stopwatch becomes a witness. It does not care how disciplined you think you are. It records what your physiology is willing to reveal. And this is only half of it. Because one number tells you how your grid behaves in stillness. The second tells you what happens after demand, when real life leans on your cells and asks for power. If this kind of plain language science helps you cut through the noise, tap like and stay with me, because the recovery test is where the truth gets harder to ignore. That second number starts the moment you stop sitting still. You do not need a lab bike, a mask, or some glossy fitness setup. You need one short bout of honest effort. A staircase with a cool handrail, a hallway, a patch of floor where your shoes can thud for half a minute. The point is simple. You raise demand, then you watch how fast the grid settles. Because how quickly your breathing and heart rate return toward baseline after exertion tells you something raw about mitochondrial output and autonomic fitness. In plain language, it shows how well your body makes power and how cleanly it regains control after spending it. So here is the home version. First, sit quietly for a minute and notice your normal breath. Then, do one safe burst of rhythmic effort. Brisk stair climbing works. Fast marching in place works. A hard walk down the hall and back works. You are trying to create a clean wave of demand. 30 to 60 seconds is enough for most people. Enough to warm the legs, hear the breath get louder, maybe feel the pulse in the neck or wrists. Then stop. Stand or sit. Start the timer again. Now pay attention to what the stopwatch hears that your ego usually talks over. Does your breathing calm within the first minute, or does it keep fluttering high in the chest? Does your heartbeat settle with a smooth drop, or does it pound on long after the effort is over? Those minutes after movement matter because recovery is where the body confesses. A younger, better trained system clears the stress signal faster. A worn one lingers in it. That is why two people can do the same task and one feels normal a minute later, while the other feels like a fuse almost blew. This is where the self-test stops being abstract. Your first number came from stillness. Your second comes from return. Put them together, and you begin to glimpse your cellular energy age in motion. Maybe your breath hold was shorter than expected. Maybe the recovery dragged longer than it should. That combination is common after 50, especially when training has faded and VO2 max has been slipping quietly in the background for years. For tonight, keep it clean. Write down your bolt time, the effort you chose, and how long it took for your breathing to feel close to normal again. Same chair, same timer, same honesty. Because once you have those two numbers, the next question gets dangerous. What if the body is waiting for a signal with a name? That name is PGC1 alpha. And once you hear what it does, a lot of your last 10 years starts to make unsettling sense. Think about the moment after effort when your shirt is slightly damp at the collar, your pulse is tapping in your throat, and the room feels a little too warm. Inside the muscle, that is exercise. It is a message. PGC1 alpha is one of the master regulators that answers that message. When demand rises often enough, it helps switch on mitochondrial biogenesis, the building of fresh cellular power units inside the tissue that is doing the work. In other words, your body still knows how to expand its power supply. It has not forgotten the blueprint. That matters more after 50 than most people realize. A lot of people assume their fatigue is just mileage. They start cutting back. They move less, breathe shallower, avoid hills, avoid the pace that makes the ribs open and the legs heat up. The body reads that retreat with brutal honesty. If there is no repeated need for more energy, it does not invest in more capacity. The grid shrinks to match the demand, quietly, efficiently. And then one day, a flight of stairs feels personal. This is where ancient practice turns out to be smarter than it looked. Breath-hold traditions were never only about calm. They trained the body to meet rising air hunger without wasting energy and panic. Endurance traditions did the other half. Long walking, climbing, carrying, steady effort. They created a deep, repeated call for output. Old cultures kept stumbling onto the same law. Controlled stress followed by recovery changes the body you live in. So now you have the outline of the pair. The short hold after a normal exhale teaches control around the urge to breathe. The rhythmic effort creates the demand that tells muscle to adapt. One refines the signal, the other amplifies it. Together, they start speaking to the same hidden machinery. That is why this is more than a test. The stopwatch that exposed your current state can also watch the rebuild begin. For now, do one thing. Keep your two baseline numbers, and tomorrow repeat only the first measure under calm conditions. Same chair, same time if you can. No forcing. Just see whether the body gives the same answer twice. Because once you know the system is listening, the next question gets sharper. How do you trigger it without overdoing it and teaching your body the wrong lesson? You trigger it by being precise, and this is where most people miss the doorway. If the effort is too soft, the body barely hears it. If it is wild, ragged, and gasping, the signal gets messy. You are after something cleaner. Think of a steady climb, the kind that warms your thighs, deepens your breathing, and makes your skin feel a little flushed while you still stay in command. That is the zone where sustained, rhythmic endurance effort does its best work. It is one of the strongest known triggers for PGC1 alpha in working muscle, and that matters because the body responds to believable demand. Repeated demand. Not drama, demand. You can feel the difference. The wrong effort makes your mouth fly open, shoulders tighten, and thoughts turn frantic. The right effort has rhythm. Footsteps on stairs, the soft thump of shoes on a floor, the faint hiss of breath through the nose, then the mouth if needed, but never panic. In that band, you are telling the body, build me more capacity here. This is where the old endurance traditions and modern physiology shake hands again. Long walking, uphill carrying, steady cycling, rowing, brisk hiking, they all send the same message when the pace is honest enough. So your next move is not a heroic workout, it is a controlled session. Pick one form of motion you can repeat. Walk at a pace where speaking comes in short phrases, not easy singing. Climb stairs for several rounds with a smooth turn at the landing. Ride a stationary bike with enough resistance to make the legs work, not spin empty. Give it enough time for the breath to deepen and stay there. That steady stretch is important because the body needs a clear reason to invest in more power units. This is how you begin to shift cellular energy age with something ordinary and deliberate. Then comes the piece almost everyone skips. When the effort stops, do not grab your phone. Do not pace around distracted. Do not bury the evidence under noise. Stand still or sit. Feel the pulse in the chest. Listen to the breath soften. Watch how long it takes before your face, ribs, and throat feel settled again. Recovery is part of the training. It tells you whether the signal landed well or whether you overshot and taught the body strain instead of adaptation. For the next session, aim for 10 to 20 minutes of steady, rhythmic movement. Then time the return with the same stopwatch. Keep the pace repeatable. Keep the notes brief. Because once you do that a few times, an uncomfortable pattern starts showing up, and it usually appears before the numbers even improve. That pattern is usually humbling before it is encouraging. You start seeing it in small, almost annoying ways. The moment the pace picks up, your mouth wants to open early. Your shoulders creep upward. The breath turns noisy before the legs are truly tired. Then, after you stop, there is that thin, restless feeling in the chest, like the body is still arguing with the effort long after the effort has ended. Most people read that as weakness or age or proof they are out of shape. What it really gives you is a map of fragility. The test pair is doing its job. It is showing where control breaks first. And this is why the old breath disciplines matter so much here. They were teaching restraint under rising pressure. When you meet mild air hunger without flinching, you begin to separate discomfort from danger. That is a powerful change. A lot of wasted energy comes from the body reacting too early, breathing too much, treating manageable demand like a threat. The stopwatch catches that. A short hold, a jumpy recovery, a fast urge to gasp. Those are not moral failures. They are signals that the wiring between breath, effort, and calm has gotten sloppy. The first week, keep the protocol almost modest on purpose. 1 or 2 gentle bolt checks a day, never forcing them. 3 or 4 endurance sessions across the week, all rhythmic, all repeatable. During the effort, look for steadiness more than intensity. Afterward, listen for the breath to come down in waves rather than chaos. You may notice something strange. On some days, the numbers barely move, but the effort feels less alarming. That is not fake progress. Sometimes the nervous system settles before the stopwatch proves it. This is where people usually quit too early because they expected instant strength and got an education instead. The body shows them how scattered their breathing has become, how quickly they drift into tension, how long it takes to regain baseline after even short work. But that exposure is valuable. If you can see where the power leaks are, you can start sealing them. That is how cellular energy age stops being a vague sentence and becomes something trainable. So for the next few days, write down one extra detail after each session. What failed first? Was it the breath, the legs, the pulse, or the sense of panic? Keep the answer simple. One word is enough. Because once you see which piece breaks first, you are ready for the deeper twist. The body often improves in the exact reverse order from the one you expect. That reverse order catches people off guard because the first win is often not a longer breath hold at all. It is quieter than that. You finish a brisk walk and the chest settles sooner. The pounding in the throat fades faster. Your face stops feeling hot so quickly that you almost miss it. Then later, maybe that afternoon, you realize something else. The usual crash did not hit with the same force. This is why the stopwatch matters. It catches changes your mood would dismiss. A lot of people expect the hold time to leap first, because that is the dramatic number. But the body often starts by cleaning up recovery. It regains order before it shows off capacity. That makes sense when you think about what you are training. The short holds teach tolerance and steadiness. The rhythmic sessions teach your tissues to use fuel and oxygen more smoothly. When that begins to improve, your system does not waste as much energy on overreaction. The breath becomes less jumpy after effort. The heart finds its way home sooner. That is a deep change, even if the number after a normal exhale only creeps up by a second or two. This is also where you need patience with the ancient side of the practice. People who worked with breath for centuries were not collecting personal records every morning. They were shaping a response. They understood, even without modern terms, that calm under strain can be trained. Today, we can pair that old discipline with something measurable. Your recovery time becomes the living bridge between the two. It tells you whether the body is becoming less chaotic under load, and that is the soil where mitochondrial biogenesis starts to matter in real life. Protect the rhythm instead. Keep the exhale natural. Stop at the first clean urge to breathe. During your movement sessions, stay in that steady band where the breath deepens and remains organized. Then time the return. If recovery shortens before the hold improves, count that as real progress, because it is. There is one more layer here, and it is the part people rarely measure honestly. Some days, the numbers are distorted by hidden strain. Poor sleep, a tense morning, rushed breathing before the test, too much caffeine. Even a conversation that left your chest tight can nudge the result. The stopwatch is fair, but your setup has to be fair too. So from now on, add one more line to your notes. What state were you in before you tested? Calm, wired, tired, rushed, heavy? One word. Because once you track that, you begin to see something eerie. The score is not only reading your fitness, it is reading your stress. That is when the whole thing stops feeling like a fitness test and starts feeling like a lie detector. You can see it in the setup before the timer even starts. A rushed morning leaves the jaw tight. Too much coffee makes the fingers a little buzzy on the stopwatch. A bad night of sleep gives the breath a thin, impatient edge, like it is already one step ahead of you. Then the hold shortens, the recovery drags, and suddenly the number reflects more than conditioning. It reflects how noisy your whole system is. That is valuable, because a stressed body burns through control first. It wastes power on alarm. This is where the older breath traditions become even more interesting. They were never just about the lungs. They were a way of training the body to stay organized when the internal signal rose. The first clear urge to breathe is information. The seconds after movement, when your pulse is trying to find its way back down, are information too. Together, they show how much static is sitting on the line. When that static is high, every effort costs more than it should. The muscles are doing work, yes, but the stress response piles on top, and the price goes up. So now your notes become sharper. Before each check, mark your state with one word. Then, after the hold or the effort, compare it. You may notice that wired days slash the time fast. Tired days can go either way, depending on whether the tiredness is calm or agitated. Calm days often reveal the truth of your actual baseline. This matters because if you only test on chaotic days, you will confuse life stress for permanent decline. If you only test on your best days, you will flatter yourself and miss the real pattern. And here is the part many people find strangely emotional. Once they start measuring this honestly, they realize how often they have been living in low-grade overdrive. They thought the afternoon slump was a food issue, or a motivation issue, or simply the years catching up. Then the numbers shift with stress, and something clicks. The grid is noisy. Part of the work is reducing waste. For the next round, keep the movement session the same, but change the preparation. Sit quietly for 1 minute beforehand. Let the breath settle through the nose if comfortable. Unclench the shoulders. Then test again. Same stopwatch, same honest pace. See whether a calmer start changes the return. Because if it does, the next step is powerful. You are no longer just measuring capacity. You are learning how to shape the signal before it ever reaches the muscle. That is a very different kind of power, because now you can influence the reading before the reading influences you. A calmer start changes the whole texture of the test. The chair feels steadier under you. The air coming through the nose feels cooler, thinner, more deliberate. Your ribs stop lifting so high. Even the click of the stopwatch sounds less like a challenge and more like a witness. When you settle first, then test, you begin to learn a hidden rule. It responds to the quality of the signal carrying that demand. This is where the pair starts behaving like training instead of measurement. Before the movement session, you sit for a minute and let the breath get quieter. Then you do 1 or 2 gentle holds after a normal exhale, just enough to feel that first edge of air hunger, and meet it without hurry. Nothing dramatic, nothing strained. Then you stand up and move. The difference can be subtle at first. The first minute of walking or climbing feels smoother. The urge to overbreathe arrives later. The chest stays wider, less twitchy. That is preparation. And the preparation matters because the movement itself is what calls for structural change. Steady effort remains the loud part of the message. That is still where PGC1 alpha hears real demand and the body begins leaning toward more capacity in the working tissue. But when you arrive at the effort less scattered, you waste less of the session on internal static. More of the work goes where you want it to go. Less gets burned in panic, tension, and sloppy pacing. You do not need a complicated routine for this. 1 quiet minute, 1 or 2 short holds, then 10 to 20 minutes of rhythmic motion at a repeatable pace. Afterward, you sit or stand still and watch recovery the same way you have been doing. This creates a chain the body can learn: settle, signal, move, return. Each piece informs the next. The stopwatch keeps score without emotion. A lot of people discover something almost embarrassing here. They were starting every session in a low-grade rush and then blaming the workout for feeling harsh. Once the preparation changes, the same stairs, the same pace, the same length of time can feel cleaner, more controlled. That tells you the body was never only limited by output. Part of the bottleneck was how it entered the task. So try exactly that on your next session. Quiet minute, 2 easy holds, same rhythmic effort, same timing on the return. Write down 1 word for how the movement felt compared with usual: rough, smooth, panicked, steady. Because when that word starts changing before the big numbers do, you are standing right at the edge of the real shift. That shift is easy to miss if you are only hunting for dramatic numbers. What usually changes first is the feel of the work. The staircase that used to make your breathing turn ragged by the second flight now feels more even. The first few minutes of a brisk walk stop feeling like a negotiation. Your chest does not clamp down as quickly. The return afterward is less noisy. These are early signs that the line between stress and effort is starting to separate. And once that happens, the actual training signal gets cleaner. This is where people often make a mistake. They feel smoother for a few sessions, get excited, and suddenly push too hard. The breath turns choppy, The neck tightens, the pace gets jerky, and the next day they wonder why the numbers stall or even slide backward. It is feedback. The body does not reward random surges well, especially when you are trying to rebuild capacity after years of quiet decline. Consistency is louder than heroics here. So the protocol needs shape. Keep the short pre-session holds gentle. Keep the movement rhythmic. Most days, the effort should feel like you could continue a little longer if you had to. You should be able to say a few words, though not comfortably carry on a long chat. That is the sweet band where demand stays real and controlled. It gives the tissues a reason to adapt without flooding the whole system with too much alarm. In practical life, this is what makes the training survivable enough to repeat, and repeatability is what turns a single session into actual change. Then there is the second mistake. People assume every gain must show up in the breath hold, but the bolt time is only one window. Sometimes the first real evidence appears in the recovery note or in that one-word description after movement. Smooth begins replacing rough. Steady shows up more often than panicked. You recover enough to go on with your day instead of feeling subtly drained for hours. That is progress with teeth. For the next stretch, keep your notes in 3 simple lines. 1 word before the session for your state. 1 word after the session for how the effort felt. 1 short recovery note, such as settled fast or lingered. Do that for several sessions without changing too many variables. Same route if possible. Same stairs. Same time of day when you can manage it. Let the pattern reveal itself. Because once you stop chasing single moments and start watching patterns, another fact comes into view, one that changes how you interpret aging itself. The body is often far more trainable than the story you have been telling about it. That is the point where the story you have been telling yourself starts to crack. A lot of people hit this week and feel almost offended by their own numbers. The hold is shorter than they expected. The recovery hangs around longer than it should. A simple set of stairs leaves more noise in the chest than their pride is comfortable admitting. And because the reading is so plain, there is nowhere to hide inside vague language. You cannot call it just one of those days every time. The stopwatch is too plain for that. It gives you a number, a sensation, a pattern. And sometimes that pattern says your body has been older in function than you were willing to believe. That can sting. But it also clears something important out of the way. It removes the old moral judgment. You are discovering a lack of reserve. Those are very different things. One attacks identity. The other can be trained. When people confuse the two, they retreat. They move less, trust themselves less, and hand normal decline even more territory. When they separate them, the mood changes. The chest tightness after effort becomes information. The jumpy breathing becomes information. Even the day when everything feels rough becomes information. This is why the first week matters so much. It teaches honesty before it teaches victory. You begin to notice that some limits belong to stress, some to breathing habits, some to lost conditioning, and some to simple inconsistency. That is a much better place to begin than fantasy. You stop asking, "What is wrong with me?" and start asking, "Which part breaks first, and under what conditions?" That question is practical. It gives you leverage. So if you have your notes now, look at them like a mechanic looks at a dashboard. Age range, hold time, recovery feel, state before the session, 1 word after the session. If you want, put the age range and the 2 main numbers in the comments, because the comparison itself can be surprisingly clarifying. You will see very quickly that people of the same age can have very different patterns, and people with similar patterns can improve in very different ways. For the next few sessions, do not try to prove anything. Just keep collecting clean data. Same setup, same pace, same honesty. Let the pattern become obvious enough that you cannot argue with it anymore. Because once the pattern is clear, the next step is learning what your specific combination of numbers is actually saying. What your pattern is saying depends on which number refuses to move. If the hold stays short and jumpy while the recovery after movement gets cleaner, that usually points to one kind of lag. The body may already be getting better at handling effort, but your breathing habits are still too eager, too reactive, too quick to spend air. You are improving, but one side of the circuit is behind the other. On the other hand, if the hold becomes calmer, yet your breath and pulse still take forever to settle after a brisk session, that points somewhere else. The control piece may be sharpening while the actual energy machinery in the working tissue still needs more honest demand. This is why one snapshot can mislead you and a string of sessions can tell the truth. A decent hold does not automatically mean strong recovery. A smoother recovery does not automatically mean your breathing pattern is efficient all day. And if both are low at the same time, that usually means the body is carrying more strain and less reserve together. That combination is common. It feels like aging from the inside. You wake up less restored. Small tasks borrow too much. A short climb leaves residue. Once you understand that, your training stops being random. If your holds are the weak point, you treat the breath work with more care. Short, calm, repeated exposure to that first urge. No straining, no showmanship. If recovery is the weak point, you protect the rhythmic movement sessions and make them regular enough for the tissues to believe the demand is real. This is where PGC1 alpha matters in everyday language. The body builds where it is asked to build, repeatedly, specifically, and it builds slower than your impatience wants, but faster than your old story would have you believe. There is also a third pattern, and it confuses people at first. Sometimes, both numbers improve only a little, but daily life starts feeling easier anyway. The grocery bag feels lighter. The stairs stop taking a bite out of you. The heavy patch in the afternoon loosens. That is when the numbers are lagging behind lived reality. It happens. Your notes catch it if you let them. This is why I keep telling you to record what the session felt like, not just what the timer said. For the next week, read your results with that lens. Ask one question only. Is my weak point breath control, recovery after effort, or both? Then adjust gently toward the weaker side while keeping the pair together. Because once you know which side is lagging, the weekly structure almost builds itself. And that is where this stops being an experiment and starts becoming a method. Once you know the weak side, the week gets much simpler. You need a believable one. If breath control is lagging, the short holds show up almost daily, brief enough that they do not drain you, and regular enough that the body keeps hearing the lesson. If recovery after effort is lagging, the rhythmic sessions become non-negotiable, because that is where the deeper rebuild request is made. Either way, the pair stays together. One teaches the signal, one creates the demand. A practical week might look like this. On most days, 1 or 2 minutes of calm setup and a few gentle holds after a normal exhale. Then, several days across the week, a session of steady movement, long enough for the breath to deepen and stay organized. Some sessions can be shorter and easier, especially when life is loud. Some can be longer if the body is handling them well. The point is to repeat the pattern until it becomes familiar enough for the body to trust it. Trust matters here more than people think. The system adapts to what it expects to happen again. A single intense burst is noise. A repeated rhythm becomes instruction. This is where ancient practice and modern mechanism keep meeting in the same place. Calm the signal, apply honest demand, recover cleanly, repeat. Over time, that is what nudges tissue toward more capacity, and that is where changes linked to mitochondrial biogenesis begin to matter in real life, instead of just sounding impressive in theory. You also need one fixed retest point. Pick a day each week when the conditions are as similar as possible. Same chair, same timer, same effort test afterward. That single anchor keeps you from getting lost in daily mood swings. Some sessions will feel fantastic and show little. Some will feel ordinary and show more than expected. The retest day steadies your view. It reminds you that progress is a trend, not a mood. One more thing matters now. Leave room for recovery between stronger efforts. If every session feels like a test of character, you are teaching strain. If the sessions are too easy forever, you are teaching maintenance. You want that middle band where the breath deepens, the body works, and the return still comes back under your watch. That is the sweet spot. So build your week tonight. Choose the days for the short holds. Choose the days for the movement. Choose the one day you will retest. Keep it simple enough that you will actually do it. Because once the schedule exists on paper, the next challenge is no longer confusion. It is intensity. And getting that wrong changes everything. Getting the intensity right is less about gadgets than honesty. You can feel the right zone in your throat, ribs, and stride. The breath is deep, but not wild. Your steps or pedal strokes stay rhythmic instead of sloppy. You could speak a short phrase if you had to, but you would not want to tell a story. That is the band. Too easy, and the body hears comfort and keeps the same budget. Too hard, and everything turns noisy again. The jaw tightens, the chest flutters, the pace loses shape, and the session starts teaching survival instead of adaptation. A lot of people past 50 have been sold two bad options. Either shuffle through motions so gentle the body never needs to upgrade, or punish yourself with effort that trashes recovery and gets abandoned by the second week. Neither works well. The sweet spot sits in the middle, and it feels strangely humble. It does not look cinematic. It looks like steady stairs, a brisk hill, a determined walk with your arms actually moving, a bike ride where the legs warm and the breath thickens but stays under command. This is where the talk test earns its keep. During the working part, you should be able to get out a few words, but not cruise through full conversation. If you can sing, it is too soft. If you cannot control the breath enough to answer a simple question, it is probably too hard for the kind of repeated signal you are trying to build. That middle band is where the effort is loud enough to matter and calm enough to repeat. It is where the tissues keep hearing the same useful instruction, session after session. And remember, the return still matters as much as the climb. When the session ends, watch how the breath comes down. Listen for the change from high, dry, restless breathing to something quieter and lower. Feel the pulse stop hammering in the throat. That return is part of the message. If you overshoot every time, the body will tell you. The next day's notes get rougher. The hold feels more jagged. The whole system sounds louder. So, on your next movement day, forget performance for a moment and train the zone. Use the talk test. Keep the rhythm. Let the work build gradually instead of exploding upward. Then note how quickly you come back down afterward. That is the piece people skip, and it is often the most revealing. Do that for a few sessions, and something interesting usually happens before any big retest. A familiar crash later in the day begins to loosen its grip. And when that happens, the stopwatch is no longer the only witness. Your ordinary life starts answering back. When ordinary life starts answering back, that is when this becomes impossible to dismiss. The first signs are almost laughably small. You carry something across the room and do not feel the usual little drain afterward. You come up the stairs and realize your mouth did not fly open. The late afternoon arrives, and that heavy curtain does not drop as hard. Maybe you still feel tired, but it is cleaner, less swampy, less like the whole grid is browning out. These are not glamorous changes. They are useful changes, and they often show up before the bigger retest does. This matters because daily life is where the rebuild has to cash out. A longer hold or a smoother recovery on paper is good, but what you really want is less friction in the hours you live inside. When the body handles small demands with less noise, that means the cost of being alive is starting to come down. Tasks stop charging you interest all day. A short walk no longer leaves a ghost of effort behind it. Even mentally, some people notice the late-day fog thinning a little. The body and brain both live on the same budget. At this stage, keep one extra note at the end of each day. Just one line. What felt easier today? What felt easier? Stairs, errands, focus, recovery after chores, getting up from a chair. That note matters because it ties the protocol back to reality. It protects you from obsessing over a single stopwatch reading and missing the fact that your life is already getting less expensive to run. This is also the phase where people get tempted to complicate everything. They want new devices, new add-ons, new tricks. Be careful there. The core pair is still doing the heavy work. Calm the signal, apply rhythmic demand, watch the return, repeat. The old practices found this through experience. Modern language gives you terms like PGC1 alpha, but the lived truth is still simple. The body responds to steady instruction more reliably than to novelty. So for the next few days, keep the protocol the same and expand the notes. Add that one daily line about what felt easier. Keep the movement honest. Keep the holds gentle. Let the pattern keep building without grabbing at it too hard. Because once daily life starts shifting, something deeper often begins to change too, and it has less to do with stamina than with identity. That change in identity can hit harder than the physical change. At first, you think you are just tracking breath, effort, and recovery. Then one day you notice you are no longer talking to yourself the same way. The old script starts losing its grip. I guess I'm just not that person anymore. I'm too far gone for this to matter. This is what happens now. Those lines sound solid when your body keeps handing you the same tired evidence. But once the evidence shifts, even a little, the story attached to it starts cracking. And that matters, because a lot of people have been carrying shame where they should have been carrying data. This is one of the quiet cruelties of getting older in a body that feels underpowered. You start assigning moral meaning to biological drift. You think your discipline disappeared. You think your toughness thinned out. You think the afternoon heaviness says something about your character. Then a few weeks of clean testing and steady work reveal something else. The problem was never just in your attitude. Part of it was reserve. Part of it was control. Part of it was how the body had adapted to years of low demand and noisy recovery. That realization is not soft. It is liberating. Because once you stop treating every rough day like proof of personal decline, you can work on the actual levers. Breath setup, rhythmic effort, recovery quality, repetition. The whole process becomes less emotional in the worst way and more emotional in the best way. Less shame, more authority. Less guessing, more response. You are no longer standing in front of vague fatigue asking it to explain itself. You are watching patterns move under your own hands. This is a good moment to tighten your language. When the old script shows up, replace it with the real one. Instead of, "I'm just getting old," try something more accurate. "My recovery is improving," or "My weak point is still breath control," or even, "Today the system is stressed, so I train accordingly." Those sentences sound simple, but they change how you meet the work. They move you from judgment into steering. For the next few days, keep the protocol exactly as it is and add one more note after your evening line about what felt easier. Write down the sentence that used to run in your head and then replace it with the measured version. One line. Nothing dramatic, just true. Because when that inner script starts changing, the separate pieces begin to lock together in a new way, and then the whole thing stops feeling like a handful of habits and starts feeling like one living system. When the pieces lock together, the whole method changes character. The short hold is no longer just a test. It becomes a way of quieting the line before demand. The movement session is no longer just exercise. It becomes the part where the body is asked, clearly and repeatedly to expand what it can support. The recovery is no longer the afterthought. It becomes proof of whether the signal was clean enough to teach something useful. And the notes stop being busy work. They become the map that lets you see the pattern while you are still living inside it. This is the moment people usually feel that strange mix of awe and practicality. Awe because something as ordinary as a chair, a hallway, a set of stairs, and a cheap timer can reveal so much. Practicality because the body responds to this with almost rude straightforwardness. Calm the breath. Create real rhythmic demand. Return to baseline under watch. Repeat. Over time, that sequence becomes a conversation with tissue, nerves, and energy supply all at once. You do not have to feel mystical about it for it to be real, but there is something uncanny in how quickly the body starts answering. This is also where the science word finally earns its place. PGC1 alpha is not just a term you heard and forgot. It becomes the invisible coordinator behind repeated effort that the body believes. You do not command it directly with willpower. You set the conditions it responds to. That is what makes the whole process feel less like self-help theater and more like a real biological negotiation. You are not begging the body to change. You are sending the same understandable instruction often enough that it starts acting on it. So, for the next few sessions, stop thinking of the breathwork, the movement, and the recovery note as separate habits. Run them as one chain. Quiet minute, gentle holds, rhythmic effort, timed return. One line about how the effort felt. One line about what felt easier later in the day. Keep the chain intact. And then, prepare for the part most people avoid. At some point very soon, you need to rerun the pair under similar conditions and compare it to where you started. Same chair, same kind of effort, same timer, same honesty. This is where hope either becomes evidence or fantasy gets corrected. Either way, it is valuable. Because the body has been answering you this whole time. And now, you are about to ask it the only question that really matters. That question is brutally simple. Did the body answer? You ask it the same way you did at the start. Same chair under your legs. Same small pause before the timer starts. Same ordinary exhale. Same short, honest effort afterward. No theatrics, no extra motivation speech, no trying to squeeze a bigger score out of yourself because you want the result to mean something. This is where people are most tempted to cheat, because the number now carries emotion, it carries hope, it carries proof. But a forced test only muddies the truth, and the truth, even when it is messy, is more useful than a flattering lie. When you rerun it cleanly, pay attention to more than the raw count. Did the first urge to breathe feel calmer? Did the effort feel less jagged on the way up? Did the return after movement lose some of its frantic edge? Sometimes the visible gain is in the numbers. Sometimes it is in the shape of the experience. The hold may be only a little longer, but the whole event feels less hostile. The recovery may still take time, but it comes down more smoothly. Those changes matter. They tell you the system is learning. And if the numbers do move, even modestly, that can land with a surprising amount of force. Not because a stopwatch has magical power, because it answers back. For weeks, maybe years, your body felt like something that was only drifting in one direction. More fatigue, more drag, more recovery debt. Then you repeat the same plain test, and the line shifts, even slightly. That tiny change says something enormous. The body is still negotiable. Some people will see the first proof in the hold. Some will see it in the recovery. Some will feel it in daily life before the sheet of notes catches up. All of that counts. The danger now is impatience. Once people get proof of response, they want acceleration. They want to pile on intensity, add complexity, chase faster returns. Sometimes that works for a day or two. Then the old noise comes roaring back. The wiser move is to let the result guide the next cycle instead of hijacking it. So after the retest, write down 3 things only: the new hold, the feel of recovery, one change in ordinary life that now seems undeniable. Then compare them to your first notes without drama. Because the final step is not celebrating the number. It is understanding what the number means when everything you have been doing becomes one coherent instruction to the body. What the number means is this: the body listened. You sat in the same chair. You felt the same cool edge of the stopwatch against your thumb. You let out the same ordinary breath, held to the same first honest urge, and watched the seconds land where they landed. Then you moved, not as a performance, but as a message. You listened to your feet on the floor, to the breath rising and settling, to the pulse finding its way home. And somewhere inside all those plain things, the answer came back. Maybe as a longer hold, maybe as a smoother return, maybe as the simple shock of reaching the top of the stairs without that old private negotiation in your chest. However it appeared, it appeared. That is the real reveal hidden inside a quantified cellular energy age self-test. A simple at-home breath hold and recovery measure that reveals how far mitochondrial energy output has fallen after 50, paired with an ancient breath hold and rhythmic effort protocol that switches new mitochondria building through PGC1 alpha back on. The test is not there to shame you. The protocol is not there to entertain you. Together, they let you witness something most people never see clearly enough to trust. Decline can be measured, yes, but response can be measured too. And once response is visible, the old spell of helplessness starts breaking. You did not need a dramatic rescue. You needed a repeatable signal. A quiet minute before effort. A controlled meeting with that first hint of air hunger. Rhythmic work strong enough to matter and steady enough to repeat. A recovery watched instead of ignored. That chain becomes instruction. Over time, it becomes infrastructure. The body begins acting less like a locked room and more like a house with lights coming back on one circuit at a time. A small green light on a timer is nothing special by itself. But when it blinks in a quiet room after you finish the retest and your breath settles sooner than it used to, it stops being plastic and glass. It becomes evidence. Later, the timer is back on the counter. The room is still. Somewhere in the house, a floorboard gives a soft creak, and your breathing no longer sounds like a warning. If you want more of these deep dives into hidden body mechanics, stay close to the channel. And if you run your own retest, leave a note about what changed first, the hold, the recovery, or the way the day itself started to feel.